our mission is to understand the main ways people exit, fading versus disassociation.
Right.
And crucially, what the real-world consequences actually are, especially the severe social impact these materials talk about.
And here's where it gets really interesting right off the bat. The official stance you might hear from the organization, it sort of suggests inactive members aren't shunned.
Okay.
But the picture painted across these sources, it's very different. It describes this pervasive, often devastating shunning that hits people no matter how they leave.
So let's quickly get grounded in the context from these sources. Jehovah's Witnesses are pretty consistently described as a high-demand group.
Very high demand. Strict rules, big focus on Armageddon being just around the corner.
And independent thinking. Some accounts say it's really discouraged, even called things like a trap and a snare.
Yeah, exactly. So within that, the sources point to two main ways people try to leave. First, there's fading.
Fading.
This is the quiet way, gradually doing less over months, stopping meetings, not going out preaching anymore.
Right. The hope being, according to these accounts, that maybe you can avoid the really harsh shunning that way.
That seems to be the idea for many, historically at least.
Yeah.
Just sort of slip away.
Okay. And the other path.
That's disassociation. This is more formal. Explicit often involves writing a letter saying, I resign.
Or it can be triggered, the sources say.
Yes, by action seen as breaking ties, like joining another church or the military. The organization sees it as you consciously cutting yourself off.
Okay, so this is where that contrast you mentioned earlier really hits home.
Exactly. Because official statements might talk about elders reaching out to inactive ones or imply shunning is just for the formally disfellowshipped.
But the reality on the ground.
The lived reality described again and again in these accounts and the research, it's that severe shunning often happens whether you fade or you formally disassociate. It's quite stark.
And the sources have specifics.
Oh, yeah. They mention internal publications like older watchtowers, directly telling members not to hang out with disfellowshipped people.
Uh-huh.
And this is pretty significant. Reports mention this kind of loophole almost.
A loophole.
Where elders can call in someone who's just fading, just inactive, and if that person says something dissenting in the meeting, bang, they can be forcibly disassociated, is the term used, which means formal shunning gets triggered anyway.
Wow, so even fading isn't safe.
It seems not. For many, it's a powerful control thing.
Right.
In fact, some of their own literature cited says the end result is the same. For disfellowshipped and disassociated folks, they're outcasts, subject to shunning.
And the shunning, it's not just awkwardness at parties. The language in the sources is intense.
Incredibly strong. Institutionalized estrangement, emotional abuse. Some even call it a social death penalty.
Social death penalty, that's heavy.
Imagine being erased. Examples like family just refusing contact, not coming to your wedding, even being literally photoshopped out of pictures.
Unbelievable.
It forces this painful realization, sources say, that the love felt conditional on staying in line.
And the psychological fallout from that must be immense.
Profound, according to the sources. Often triggers a real identity crisis, like a mourning process for your old self, your old community. Accounts detail serious mental health struggles. Depression, anxiety, religious trauma is a big one, and tragically, increased risk of suicidal thoughts.
So comparing the two exit methods then, fading might seem gentler? Maybe.
It might offer a slower break, maybe feel like you have a bit more control at first, but comes with this constant prolonged anxiety. And always that risk of being found out, forced out anyway, that whole PMO state, physically in, mentally out. It sounds exhausting.
Yeah, and disassociation.
That's a clearer choice, an act of agency. But it often means immediate, acute trauma from that very explicit, widespread shunning.
So neither path is easy. Far from it.
Not at all. And regardless of the path, recovery is consistently described as a long, hard road.
What helps, according to the sources?
Building new social connections is vital outside the faith. And getting professional help, specifically mentioning religious trauma counseling, which seems increasingly recognized as necessary.
Right.
But ultimately, despite all the pain, the trauma, leaving is also shown as a path to growth, to building a new, authentic identity. And for many, finding real freedom, real happiness, that just wasn't possible before.
What really stands out looking at all this is how that same severe outcome, the shunning, seems to happen regardless of the path taken.
It really highlights the strength of those social control mechanisms, doesn't it?
It really does. For many, it seems the choice isn't if they'll be shunned, but maybe just how and when it hits.
Which leads to this really important question, I think. When you see the deep pain These accounts describe from lost community, conditional love. What does the resilience people show, their ability to rebuild their identities, tell us?
Yeah.
What does it say about that fundamental human need we all have for, genuine connection, for freedom?
Yeah. That's definitely something for you, the listener, to really mull over.